Imagine something living within you that you desperately try to get rid of, something that causes burning irritation, shame, or a dull numbness. It might be explosive anger that you've suppressed for years, fearing you'll destroy everything around you, or a piercing, paralyzing laziness that makes you feel useless. Perhaps it's a biting envy you hide even from yourself, or an uncontrollable desire for control that feels like a weakness. We've grown accustomed to seeing these manifestations as our main flaws, our inner demons with whom we wage an endless, exhausting war. We believe that by eradicating them, we will find peace and strength. But what if this is the deepest misconception? What if the shadows where we believe our ugliest vices lurk are actually repositories of our purest, most unexpressed gold? This is the scandalous truth. What we so stubbornly label as a defect is in reality a distorted yet vital signal, a time capsule concealing your suppressed power. Consider the rage you've driven into the darkest corners of your soul for years. Society taught you that anger is a destructive force, a sign of ill breeding, weakness, or aggression. You locked it away like a wild beast in a cage just to keep it from breaking out and hurting you or others. But what if this anger is not a destroyer, but a guardian, a furious Cerberus who could stand guard over your personal boundaries, preventing anyone from crossing them? If only you learned to hear its growl instead of silencing it. What if it's not a vice, but an unheard call for self-defense, for self-affirmation, for the healthy assertiveness capable of defending your right to existence and well-being? This suppressed volcano of energy sealed deep within your being could become the source of your unwavering determination and ability to advocate for your interests. Or take laziness, that viscous, sticky substance that seems to paralyze your will, strip you of motivation, and make you feel useless. We brand it with shame, fight it like an inner enemy, forcing ourselves to act even when our body and spirit resist. But what if this heaviness is not a sign of weakness, but a wise, albeit rough, whisper from your soul, begging for rest, for reevaluation, for a change of course? Perhaps it's not inaction, but a deep, intuitive need for a pause, for gathering strength before a new push, for recalibrating your inner compass. Maybe it's your body crying out from overload, or your soul pleading for the creative void necessary for something new to be born. This laziness might be nothing more than a signal of a need for deep replenishment, for reevaluating priorities, for seeking true inspiration rather than simply following externally imposed goals. Every such suppressed reaction, every inner conflict is not a curse but a treasure map, pointing to where your most valuable resource is buried. These are not mistakes to be corrected, but encrypted messages from your true primal power. For years, we've fought ghosts, not realizing that in their tenacious embrace lies the key to our authentic strength, to our wholeness. We turn away from these flaws as if from lepers, while they are faithful messengers carrying the cipher to our healing and flourishing. But why does this mechanism work so flawlessly? Why do we so stubbornly reject what could be our greatest asset? To understand this, we need to return to the site of the very first transgression. Let's go back to the origin, to that invisible point on the map of your soul where gold first turned into shadow. This is not a geographical place, but a moment, an imprint, like an invisible scar on the canvas of consciousness. At what point in your personal personal history did you, as if waking from a dream, suddenly realize that qualities inherently pure, untamed energy, ambition, the right to anger, the need for rest, the audacity to be vulnerable, were suddenly branded as bad, shameful, or dangerous? This was the moment the shadow was born, when a life-giving force was expelled from the visible world of your personality and driven underground. For many, this happened long before words gained their full weight. Perhaps it was a parent's disapproving glance when a child's anger manifested as a healthy assertion of personal boundaries, or a tone of voice that made you ashamed of a natural need for rest, turning it into laziness worthy of reproach. We absorb these lessons from our mother's milk, from our first fairy tales, from the unspoken expectations of society. We weren't told directly, your ambitions are evil, but we saw how those who aimed too high were punished, ridiculed, or worse, ignored. We learned that true strength is something to be concealed, not expressed. Think about anger, this primal fire meant to protect, set boundaries, and ignite righteous resolve. How many times were you taught that good girls don't get angry and real men don't lose control? And so instead of becoming your guardian, it was locked in a dungeon, transforming into a toxic residue, corroding you from within, or a blind, uncontrollable outburst that distorts its true nature, its original purpose to be a voice affirming yourself was suppressed, and it became a source of shame, not strength. Or laziness, not pathological inertia, but a wise pause, a call for re-evaluation, for gathering strength, for seeking true inspiration. How many times were you reprimanded for simply wanting to be, not to do, for dreaming, for contemplating, for inactivity that was actually a profound act of self-restoration and incubation of new ideas? You were taught that a person's worth is measured by their productivity, not by their ability to hear the inner whisper of their soul. Thus, the need for quiet and contemplation was branded as idleness, and its golden essence, the ability for deep recovery and intuitive insight, was driven underground. Ambition, the drive to grow, to realize one's potential, to create. How many times was this noble desire labeled greed, arrogance, or selfishness? You were taught to be modest, not to stand out, not to want too much, so as not to incur envy or condemnation. And so instead of becoming the driving force of your development, ambition turned into a secret vice that you shamefully hide, afraid of being judged for wanting to shine brightly, the right to make mistakes, the foundation of all learning, all innovation. But for many, this right was taken away in childhood, when every inaccuracy, every misstep was met with disappointment or punishment. Perfection became the sole measure of worth, and any failure a mark of shame. Thus, the path of trial and error, the only path to mastery, was turned into an abyss of fear, paralyzing any desire for novelty. Remember vulnerability, that amazing capacity for deep connection, for authenticity, for expressing your true self. But how many times were you told, don't cry, be strong, don't show weakness? And so an open heart capable of building bridges between souls came to be perceived as a target, a source of pain. You learned to build walls around yourself to protect what should have been your greatest gift, the ability to feel and connect. This process, this expulsion of inner qualities, was not accidental. It was the result of a complex interplay of cultural norms, family patterns, and collective unconscious beliefs. We learned to believe that to be accepted, loved, and safe, we had to sever parts of ourselves that were perceived as undesirable. And so step by step, we created our shadow, burying our most valuable gold within it, turning it into what we now perceive as our weaknesses and flaws. But every such suppressed part, every exiled quality continues to exist, demanding its return, its integration. And this need for reunification manifests in our lives as an unpaid bill and invisible debt that must be settled. We have spoken of the shadow, this repository of the unexpressed, the unresolved, of gold buried beneath layers of societal censure. But it is important to realize that this phenomenon is not an exception, a whim of an individual psyche. It is a universal law and an unwritten rule operating within each of us with the unrelenting precision of gravity. Just as water always seeks its way to the sea and a seed strives for light, suppressed energy inevitably seeks an outlet, demanding recognition. At the core of this principle lies the most ancient of fears, embedded in humanity's collective memory, the fear of tribal ostracism. In prehistoric times, this meant certain death, to be rejected, branded, excluded from the circle. This was tantamount to a death sentence. And although the modern world offers other forms of survival, this archaic terror still pulsates in the depths of our psyche. We learn to expel from ourselves those parts that in our perception might provoke this rejection. Anger that might cause condemnation, laziness that threatened the label of useless, vulnerability that might seem like weakness. We ourselves in our inner desert created this exile, believing that by doing so, we would ensure our safety and acceptance. We severed living, pulsating parts of ourselves, casting them into the dungeon of the shadow, hoping they would dissolve into oblivion. But energy does not disappear without a trace. It merely changes form. And what we banish becomes a kind of unpaid bill energy. This is a continuously growing debt to our own wholeness. Every unexpressed emotion, every unrealized need, every suppressed impulse is a promissory note that comes due again and again, sometimes in the most unexpected and destructive forms. It is like the phantom pain from an amputated limb that it would seem should have disappeared. The shadow doesn't just store, it demands. It knocks from within, manifesting as inexplicable anxiety, sudden outbursts of irritation, chronic fatigue, or even obsessive recurring scenarios in our lives. In this sense, the phenomenon of the shadow is akin to the ancient Greek concept of pharmakon, a word signifying something that is simultaneously both poison and remedy. It is a substance that in one dosage can kill and in another heal, that which can be both the cause of an illness and its solution. Just as snake venom, correctly applied, becomes an antidote, so too can our suppressed aggression, if recognized and transformed, become an unbreakable wall of personal boundaries, and our laziness, a wise guide to the true need for restoration or a reevaluation of life's path. We expelled the poison, not realizing that the cure was hidden within it. We locked away a part of ourselves that was capable not only of destroying, but also of creating, protecting, and inspiring. And so this pharmakon, this hidden gold, continues to influence our lives, often manifesting through the prism of the external world. We often encounter its reflection in other people, in those who unashamedly express the qualities we once expelled from ourselves. And then something more than mere dislike arises. It's an irrational aversion, almost hatred, which like an invisible thread connects us to our own unaccepted aspects. If the shadow is an invisible theater within us, then the external world, like a grand mirror, relentlessly reflects its characters. We, sometimes unconsciously, project our exiled aspects onto others, and then certain types of people begin to evoke an irrational, almost physical aversion in us. It's not just dislike, it's an intense reaction to something that was once an integral part of us, but was rejected, locked deep inside. Recall those who provoke in you not just irritation, but a deep, irrational contempt, almost hatred. Those whose behavior seems flagrant, unacceptable, demonstrably violating the unwritten rules you so meticulously observe. Often, these are precisely the people who freely exhibit qualities that you want to conform to upbringing or societal expectations, locked away in the dungeon of your subconscious. One such archetype is without a doubt the unrestrained tyrant. He might be your boss, a colleague, even a random passerby, but his presence always feels like a blow. He speaks loudly, interrupts, imposes his will, tolerates no objections, and easily falls into a rage if something doesn't go his way. There isn't a hint of doubt in his manner, no apologies for his assertiveness. He doesn't ask for forgiveness for taking up too much space, for his voice drowning out others, for his demands seeming exorbitant. He is the embodiment of pure, untamed will, unfiltered aggression, which in him seems to cause no shame whatsoever. There's not a trace in him of that inner censor that for years whispered to you, good people don't act like that. You can't be so brazen. Respect others' opinions. And it is precisely this shameless freedom of his that provokes a burning, almost painful aversion in you, because he freely lives out what you have forbidden yourself. Or consider another image, the shameless idler. This is someone who seems to live by their own absurd rules, ignoring accepted norms of productivity, ambition, and the pursuit of success. They might be a friend who is always laid back, never in a hurry, or a colleague who seems to do the bare minimum but still manages to thrive, or even a character from a book whose philosophy of leisure simultaneously fascinates and infuriates you. They feel no guilt for their slowness, for their long contemplations, for not burning with passion at work, for preferring contemplation to hustle. They lack that internal drive that constantly pushes you to new heights, to new achievements, to constant busyness. They are like an embodied challenge to your own internal programming. You must be useful. Time is money. Success comes to those who work hard, and their calm, almost lazy existence becomes an unbearable reminder of how you yourself have forgotten how to simply exist, simply rest, simply enjoy the moment without guilt. Let's consider one such case that might seem familiar to you. Imagine Elena, a brilliant but utterly exhausted marketing specialist. She is always one step ahead, always ready to take on more, always striving for perfection. Her schedule is packed minute by minute, her phone never stops ringing, and new ideas and deadlines constantly swirl in her head. But there's a Victor in her department. Victor is the complete opposite. He arrives at work exactly at 9, leaves exactly at 6, never work home and throughout the day manages to drink several cups of coffee, chat with everyone who passes his desk, and even, it seems, nap a little during his lunch break. His reports are always submitted on time, but without much sparkle. His presentations are adequate, but don't inspire enthusiasm. And so when Elena, drained and red-eyed, once again stays until midnight to finish a project that Victor submitted that afternoon, she feels something more than just fatigue boiling inside her. It's not just irritation. It's a dull, irrational resentment. How dare he live like that? How dare he be so calm, so uninterested when she's giving her all? His serenity seems like a personal insult to her. His laziness, a challenge to her own selflessness. She despises him, even though objectively he has done nothing wrong. But he is the living embodiment of the freedom from the endless race that she perhaps once suppressed within herself. Now ask yourself this sharp, piercing question. What types of people demonstrating these vices, anger, laziness, excessive ambition, overt vulnerability, or anything else, evoke irrational hatred, contempt, or overwhelming irritation in you? Name them. Look closely at them, for in their behavior, as in a distorted mirror, something is reflected that you once hastily banished from yourself, not realizing what valuable ability or right you thereby denied yourself. We have traversed the shadowy labyrinth of self-discovery, outlining the contours of those inner manifestations that were once exiled by us, branded as vices. Now is the time to face them without prejudice, for each of these demons that has long poisoned our existence is, in fact, a distorted reflection of the purest gold, suppressed life force awaiting its liberation. This is not merely a metaphor. It is the key to a treasure chest we ourselves locked, fearing what lay within. Take, for example, anger. So often perceived as a destructive, uncontrollable force, it appears before us sometimes as furious outbursts, leaving behind ashes of regret, sometimes as hidden, inwardly corrosive resentment, and sometimes as passive aggression, poisoning relationships. We learn to suppress it from a young age, hearing, "Don't be angry." That's not nice. Good girls/boys don't act like that. And in the process of this suppression, we didn't just relegate anger to a dark corner of the psyche. We deprived ourselves of a far more fundamental right. For the true nature of anger is not destruction, but protection. It is not chaos, but clarity of boundaries. When you forbid yourself to feel anger, you simultaneously forbid yourself from setting personal boundaries, saying no to what doesn't suit you, asserting your rights, defending your territory, your values, your dignity. You voluntarily relinquish your inner guardian, leaving yourself defenseless against the world's encroachments. Suppressed anger becomes uncontrollable because it has lost its original function as a beacon signaling a crossed line. It turns into a blind, destructive force only because we denied it the right to be a conscious tool for self-defense and self-assertion. What valuable ability did you deny yourself by banishing this vice? The right to inviolability, to self-determination, to self-respect, and your own needs. Or let's turn to laziness, that eternal companion of guilt and procrastination. In our world obsessed with productivity and constant movement, Laziness is equated to a mortal sin, a sign of weakness, or even moral decay. We chastise ourselves for every moment of inactivity, for every desire to simply be at peace without bringing visible benefit. But what if laziness is not a vice, but a wise messenger? What if it's not a call to idleness, but a deep signal from our body and spirit? Often, laziness is a cry for help, masquerading as an unwillingness to us to act. It can be a signal of physical or emotional exhaustion, a need for deep, complete rest that we systematically deny ourselves. It can also be a call to reevaluate the chosen path. Perhaps the task we are postponing is simply not ours, or requires a different approach, or is not worth our efforts at all. By suppressing laziness, we silence the voice of intuition, the voice of the body, the voice of the soul, which are trying to tell us about overload, about the wrong direction, about the need to stop and recover. We deny ourselves the right to pause, to contemplate, to slow living of the moment, to strategic retreat, which is often the only path to true progress. What valuable ability did you deny yourself by branding laziness? The right to rest, to wise planning, to listening to yourself, to opting out of a meaningless race. This principle applies to every dark corner of our psyche. Envy, for example, once considered one of the deadly sins, can actually be a powerful indicator of our unrealized desires and ambitions, a compass pointing to what we truly value and strive for. It can become a source of inspiration and motivation if we stop demonizing it and begin to explore it. The desire for control, which often leads to anxiety and frustration, conceals a deep-seated need for security, predictability, and competence, important aspects of our well-being. Even vulnerability, which we try to hide behind a mask of strength, is a source of genuine connection with others and profound humanity. Understanding this is the first step towards transformation. Each exiled demon holds not only a distorted, but also a suppressed power, a power that we forbade ourselves to express, a right that we took from ourselves. And here, in the shadow of this self-denial, lie not only lost power, but also the roots of those very obstacles that arise again and again on our path, preventing us from fully realizing our potential. And so we stand on the threshold of a paradox where the greatest strength is hidden behind a veil of fear. What we have banished into the shadow doesn't simply disappear. It continues to live, but as a shadow puppeteer, pulling the strings of our decisions. An unaccepted, unconscious shadow becomes not just an obstacle, but an active saboteur, undermining our ability to express ourselves in full. It is the fear of being like those demons, like the unrestrained tyrant or the shameless idler whom we so persistently reject, that makes us make disadvantageous decisions, suppress our true power, and voluntarily but confine ourselves within narrow boundaries. Consider someone who fears their own anger, not because anger is evil, but because as a child, every manifestation of it was met with a wall of condemnation. They were taught that good people don't get angry, that anger is the domain of brutes and aggressors, those very tyrants whom society so despises. And what happens? This person, despite possessing a sharp mind and strong will, becomes incapable of setting personal boundaries. They allow others to invade their space, exploit their labor, and disregard their opinions. Inner indignation builds up but finds no outlet because the fear of becoming someone terrible paralyzes them. The result? A chronic sense of injustice, passive aggression that destroys relationships from within, or even worse, sudden, uncontrollable outbursts of rage that only confirm their worst fears about themselves. Their strength, the strength to protect themselves, to assert their dignity, remains suppressed, and they suffer from their own helplessness. Is this not a direct path to the loss of personal power? Or take someone who has spent their life fleeing laziness. And in a world where productivity is elevated to a cult and pausing is perceived as defeat, the image of the shameless idler is one of the most terrifying. This person fears being judged, of becoming a nobody, so they constantly push themselves forward, taking on an unbearable burden, working to exhaustion. They ignore the signals from their own body and psyche, which scream about the need for rest, re-evaluation, or a creative pause. For if they stop, if they allow themselves to simply be, they risk turning into the very idler they so fiercely condemn in others and in themselves. The outcome? Burnout, chronic fatigue, loss of creativity, deep apathy, or even psychosomatic illnesses. Their strength, the power to recover, to intuitively choose the right path, to deeply understand their needs is suppressed. They lose the ability for sustainable, long-term development because their engine runs without lubrication and cooling, driven only by the fear of stopping. But won't embracing anger make me aggressive, you might ask? And won't acknowledging laziness turn me into an inert idler? This is the key misconception. We are not talking about blind indulgence or unrestrained expression. We are talking about bringing these energies back from the shadow, about their integration. True strength lies not in being a slave to your impulses, but in becoming their master. When you acknowledge your anger, you don't become an aggressor. You gain the ability to feel when your boundaries are violated and to choose how to consciously respond, be it a firm no, a calm explanation, or decisive action. When you accept your laziness, you don't turn into an idler. You learn to listen to your body and spirit, to recognize the true need for rest or a change of direction, and to use pauses as a source of renewal and strategic planning rather than as an excuse for self-flagellation. Suppression only guarantees that these energies will manifest in distorted and destructive ways. Liberation allows you to direct them. This fear of our own demons is only one side of the coin. There is another equally insidious trap we fall into when we refuse to acknowledge not only what we consider our worst aspects, but also what is our greatest treasure. We have already touched upon how the echoes of our shadow, exiled and rejected, can become distorted and manifest externally, coloring the world with the hues of our inner dissonance. We discuss the irrational surge of aversion that can arise towards individuals who effortlessly display qualities we've deeply repressed within ourselves, be it unbridled passion or serene inaction. Yet there's another facet to this projection, far more subtle and perhaps even more insidious. It's not the shadow of revulsion, but the shadow of admiration, what we dare to call the golden shadow. Imagine an archetype, an image embodying qualities you yearn for, but unconsciously deem unattainable for yourself. This could be someone in your social circle, a public figure, or even a fictional character. They exude the very confidence, fearlessness, insight, or unwavering will that you believe you lack. You observe them with reverence, from a respectful distance, and in their every gesture, every word. You find confirmation of their exceptionalism, their unique gift. At this very moment, something extraordinary occurs. You don't merely admire, you unconsciously transfer a part of your own potential power to them. You gift them your unrealized talents and abilities, your undiscovered potential, like precious gems that, in your conviction, don't belong to you. This is not mere envy or idealization. It is a profound, unconscious self-alienation. Every time you place someone on a pedestal, you inadvertently reinforce the wall between yourself and the qualities you believe they embody. You convince yourself that it's not for you, that this strength, this grace, this capacity for action is the domain of the chosen few, and you are not among them. You project your inner treasure trove onto an external object, leaving yourself to grapple with a sense of inadequacy. A paradox lies within this act of admiration. The more you exalt another, the deeper you bury your own potential, the more you sabotage your attainment of true power. Allow yourself a deep breath and honestly look within. Who is your idol or object of admiration in terms of personal power? Who is this person whose confidence seems unshakable, whose success is dazzling, whose fearlessness is striking? Perhaps it's someone who effortlessly sets personal boundaries without fear of rejection, or someone who makes decisions with surprising ease, unburdened by doubt. Maybe it's a person whose creativity overflows, or someone who appears utterly invulnerable to criticism. And here's the crucial question pulsating at the very heart of this concept. What specific talents and unrealized abilities have you given to them, believing they are not for you? What seeds of your own power have been cast onto foreign soil? This could be your hidden capacity for leadership, your inner drive for creativity, your unspoken wisdom, your right to your own opinion, your inner strength that allows you to withstand pressure. Perhaps you've surrendered your spontaneity, your right to make mistakes, your courage to be vulnerable, or your ambition to achieve great heights. These qualities are not external. They do not belong to the one to whom you gifted them. They are yours. They have always been within you, awaiting their moment, waiting for you to acknowledge them as your own and cease seeking their reflection in another's radiance. The refusal to acknowledge these inner treasures is a voluntary surrender of your own power. It is living in the shadow of another's greatness, while your own awaits only recognition. But this is only one side of the coin. If we can reclaim what was rejected, can we not also reclaim what was given away? This is not about envy, but about reclaiming wholeness, about awakening an inner source that until now has only been mirrored in another's glow. We've spoken of gold, of shadow, of the unbearable burden of the unacknowledged. But knowledge without action is like an old map that will never lead to treasure. It is time to reach out and touch this gold, for it is not somewhere external, but in the very heart of what we have so diligently rejected or conversely deified. This new philosophy does not advocate for blind indulgence in instincts, nor does it call for dissolving into the chaos of unaccepted emotions. It is a call to alchemy, to take the raw ore of your soul and transform it into noble metal. It's about recognizing that the energy we once banished into the depths of the shadow, be it the rage that should have protected our boundaries or the idleness that beckoned us to reevaluate, be it the audacity we projected onto the brazen or the genius we ascribed to the chosen ones, has not disappeared. It has merely awaited its hour, its conscious conduit. The essence of this alchemy is simple, yet it demands honesty. It lies in reclaiming the power we projected away, as if we distributed fragments of our radiant self to other people and phenomena. This process requires not willpower, but the power of insight, the ability to see through the veil of illusions. I propose a simple exercise that can become your personal compass in these unseen labyrinths. Find a quiet place where nothing will disturb your inner dialogue. Recall a person who evokes in you either a sharp, almost irrational irritation or aversion, or conversely an almost unbearable admiration bordering on deification. This is not someone you simply love or respect, but someone who magnetically draws your attention, eliciting a powerful emotional response, a tempest within. Now ask yourself, what specific quality of this person elicits such a powerful reaction? Not their actions in general, not their personality, but precisely a quality. For example, their audacity, their confidence, their relaxedness, their generosity, their assertiveness, their independence, their ability to create, their recklessness. Isolate this quality. Write it down. Now take a deep breath. Close your eyes and ask yourself, how could this quality in its pure, undistorted form manifest within me? How could I reclaim this energy without becoming a caricature of it, without becoming a copy of the one I reject or deify, but using it as a tool for my own growth, for expanding my true self? Perhaps your suppressed audacity is a voice afraid to be heard. Your hidden generosity is a resource you fear depleting. Your unacknowledged assertiveness is the ability to establish boundaries, and your latent idleness is a signal for the need for deep rest and life re-evaluation. Answer the question, how can you make room for this quality in your life? Not by suppressing, not by projecting, but by channeling. Write down specific steps, even the smallest. This might be a conversation you've been postponing, an hour of idleness without guilt, or a new hobby that releases creative energy. This is not a one-time action, but an ongoing practice, a reclaiming of yourself bit by bit. Every time you feel a strong emotional reaction to someone external, pause. It's a signal. The shadow beckons you to a dialogue, extending a thread leading to lost gold. And the more such threads you gather, the more fragments of yourself you integrate, the more whole and potent your personality will become. For true power lies not in control over others, but in mastery of your inner world. But what happens when these reclaimed fragments begin to interact not only within us, but also with the collective unconscious, with the powerful archetypal forces that shape our common world? How can one person's insight affect the fabric of reality when their personal gold becomes part of a great invisible economy of